I am incredibly allergic to sunflower seeds. Every time I consume them, by accident of course, the reaction is significantly worse than the time immediately before. About 10 years ago, I had a reaction that was so severe I ended up in an emergency medical facility. Because of my allergy, I rely on labels to keep me safe. And we all rely on labels to inform and to warn us about the ingredients in food and the contents of other products so that we can make informed decisions that affect our well-being. As consumers, we expect our labels to be truthful, to be complete, and to be precise. All eminently reasonable expectations for labels for goods. But do these concepts apply when we're not talking about labeling products in the marketplace, but instead we're talking about labeling people? This is a question that I had to grapple with several years ago because in 2012, I was prominently labeled. Locally, and much to my surprise, nationally, the gay judge. After I stated publicly that I did not officiate marriage ceremonies, I declined to exercise that privilege that comes with my position because I could not exercise it equally for all couples who desired to be married. At the time, we had a state law that prohibited same-sex couples from being issued marriage licenses, and so since I could not exercise that privilege under color of law for every couple, I declined to exercise it at all. There was extensive media coverage about my statement. There were articles written, and every article that was written led with a headline that used two words to describe me: gay judge, over and over and over again. And it wasn't just the print media. There was television media coverage as well. And I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of having your face on the 6 and the 10 o'clock news with the words gay judge splashed across the front of it, but you will want to take my word for how interesting it is. If my mother was here, she would go, "It was more interesting for me." And I'm sure that it was. But that time period in my life gave me an opportunity to think more about the way that we all use labels to talk about people. And since then, various things that have happened in my life have caused me to examine the extent to which labels serve and disserve us, which is my topic today. Linguists and others who are interested in this subject talk about labels that fall in three different categories. They talk about labels that are predicated upon people's judgments. They talk about labels that are predicated upon things about us that are true. And then, of course, they talk about labels that are a mixture of people's judgments and things about us that are true. When it comes to this spectrum of labels, I think that we all understand why we reject labels that fall in the first and in the third category. They're predicated in whole or in part upon other people's judgments about us, and none of us want to be judged. But what I found surprising at the time, and still do, is the extent to which we have the same level of reaction and recoil to labels that fall in the second category. That is to say that it's not just that we don't like labels that are based upon people's judgments and opinions about us. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter if it's based on judgments or things that are true. We don't like labels. None of us want to have someone else to place us in a box with an attempt to define and confine us with words of their choosing. And because of this categorical and really blanket rejection of labels across the spectrum, it sometimes seems difficult to believe that there could ever be any benefits that flow from these labels. Over the last several years, I have come to appreciate at least two ways that labels serve us. One of the ways that I believe labels serve us is because they give us an opportunity to live a more examined life. It was Socrates who said almost 2,000 years ago that an unexamined life is not worth living, and you know what? He's right. And when we are confronted with other people's words for us, their labels, and that's how we feel, really confronted. When we're confronted with it, it is our opportunity to examine ourselves more deeply. We get to ask the question, am I bothered by the label or am I bothered that I am being labeled? There really are three reasons that we could be bothered by the label. The first reason is because it represents something that is untrue, unfair, too narrow, overbroad. The second reason that we are often bothered by labels is because they are precisely true. And the problem is that when someone puts them up in lights, we realize that it is not who we want to be. Another reason, though, that we're bothered by labels is because of our own judgmental attitudes about other people. Our own judgmental attitudes about other people. That's what causes us sometimes to have that disruption in us when someone tries to place a label on us that we think applies to people about whom we have our own judgments. The other side of things, when it's not the label that's bothering us, but instead it is the fact that we are being labeled, that's happening because we recognize that there's some truth in the label itself, the words that someone is attempting to affix to us. We recognize the truth in it. And what's bothering us about the fact that we are being labeled is that we're not comfortable with everybody knowing our truth. In some small or some large way, we are not comfortable. A good friend of mine, her late father, was known for saying the phrase, "Si Dios lo sabe, que lo sepa el mundo." If God knows it, let the world know it. But that's easier said than done, right? I mean, we are all willing to exude our confidence and our pride and our X trait. We will scream from the rafters about our pride and our X trait when we are in a stadium of other X's. But when the Y's and the O's and the Z's file in, our confidence wanes, and we ought to be asking why. Because the best way that we are going to answer the question, am I bothered by the label or am I bothered that I am being labeled, is by answering this question. Why do I care so much what other people think about me? If we are bold enough to ask these questions and courageous enough to answer them, we will not only examine our character, we can enhance it by acting on the answers that we find. The other way that labels serve us is not so much about us as it is about other people. You see, labels, they make us readily accessible to people who need to find us because of the adjective of who we are, not because of the noun. My experience with this, it runs the spectrum. Frequently, lawyers and parties who are members of the LGBT community who have matters in the court, at the conclusion of their proceeding, they ask the same question, "Judge, may I approach on a personal matter?" And they come up to the bench and they push the microphone down and they lean in and they find a way to get a private moment with me. And in that moment, they convey this message to me, that before they came to the courtroom, they researched their judge. And not finding my policies and procedures, but upon finding this label, they got to come into the courtroom less anxious. For the parties, they report that they're less anxious because they realize before they get to the courthouse, they are going to be able to testify and talk truthfully and authentically about who they are and about who their families are. The lawyers who practice in the court, they report that they are less anxious when they arrive because they know that they get to come and practice their craft without being preoccupied with whether their hair or their speech or their mannerisms or their attire conform to gender stereotypes. And these are real benefits. Citizens every single day turn to the internet looking for a judge who will officiate their ceremony, and upon finding the label, not me, but the label, they come down to the Dallas County Courthouse confident that there's a judge there who will officiate their ceremony, not just because she respects the law, but because she respects their love. And I want you to appreciate that there are scores of amazing judges in this county who are happy to officiate ceremonies for everyone. But the point is, this label gives them the confidence of knowing when they walk in the door that there is one. The greatest example for me of how these labels make us readily accessible to people who need to find us came in an interview that I had with a law student who was seeking an internship with me for the summer. And in the interview, it was revealed that she is a member of the LGBT community, but it was also revealed that she has an amazing passion for criminal justice reform. The problem is I preside over a civil district court. And so at some point I thought it appropriate to ask her if she would like for me to help her get an interview with one of my criminal judicial colleagues. And upon me making that suggestion, she got this look on her face, that look, you know, the look of I'm tanking my interview. She shouldn't be asking me this question. That look, she got that look. and she said, "Judge, may I say something?" I said, "Of course." And she looked at me and she said, "I made pretty good grades my first year in law school, and I did fairly well in undergrad, and I have a lot of confidence in my ability to learn how to be a lawyer. What I don't feel so confident about is my ability to move around the legal profession in the skin that I'm in. And for that, to get that confidence, to see what that looks like, I need to be here with you." These labels, they make us accessible to people who need to find us because of our X trait, whatever the X is. And our challenge really is to not be so preoccupied with the idea that we're being typeset or labeled that we avoid being described. As with most things, where there are benefits, there are detriments, and these labels are no different. On my journey, I have identified at least two ways that labels disserve and underserve us. The first way is because it allows someone else to highlight and underscore what they think is important about us. And this is problematic for several reasons. The first reason is because they are often doing that in an effort to suggest to the world that the thing they have identified and highlighted in their label is the centric, most dominant, most important thing about who we are, or worse, that it is who we are in our totality. And this, of course, runs afoul of the court that is at the center of all of us, that says, I am not my pieces, I am not my parts, I am the sum of them, and I deserve to be regarded in that way. But the other reason that it's problematic, of course, for others to underscore and highlight what they think is important about us is because sometimes they're highlighting things at a time that is particularly inconvenient for us. Such was the case for me in 2012. I was a brand new judge. I had been on the bench barely 13 months, and I was trying to make a reputation for myself as a jurist. I wanted people to be focused on the work that I had done that first year on the bench to turn the court around and put it in a new direction. I wanted people to be focused on the traits of an impeccable jurist: my knowledge of the law, fairness, impartiality, my application of the law, my devotion to the court. Instead of focusing on those traits, they were focused on this. Which brings me to the other reason that it's problematic for other people to underscore who they think we are with their labels. Because their labels, they have staying power. Earlier this year, I sat on a panel with a lawyer who is a friend of mine, and he related to me that he was telling another lawyer in his office about the fact that we were going to be sitting on a panel together. He shared with that lawyer what we would be speaking about. He told the lawyer we were going to be driving up to Weatherford to speak at a local college. He even told the lawyer about a recent accolade that I had received, being recognized as the trial judge of the year in 2015. And at the conclusion of everything that he said, you know what the lawyer said? "Oh yeah, the gay judge." These labels, they have staying power. But it's not just the words themselves that are problematic. It is the effect that the words have in the context in which they are being used. I had experience with this in 2015 when this meme surfaced. Somebody thought it was a fun idea to juxtapose me for not exercising a privilege of my office against the Honorable Kim Davis, the clerk in Kentucky who refused to exercise the duties of her office after the marriage equality decision. And so they created this meme. And you can see there the label that they have affixed to me and the label they've affixed to her. And this is what I call the antonym effect. Because when people are labeling us this, they are not just saying we are this, they are trying to tell the world we are not something else. And this is a great example of it. If I am the lesbian judge, then I must not be a Christian one. If I am a lesbian judge, then I must not be a person of faith. And the problem with this label, as with so many of them, is it's just not true. I proudly proclaim my faith. It's just not true. At the end of the day, you all know that what I do for a living is I take competing concepts, contradictory evidence, and I put it on a scale, not literally, but figuratively, and I weigh it and decide what do I think about how it ought to turn out. So as it relates to the benefits versus the detriments, the ways that labels serve us versus the ways they disserve us, what says the court? The court says this: I disfavor the use of single words and short phrases to try to inform and warn the world about who people are. I disfavor that practice in favor of the practice of using full sentences and paragraphs and pages and careful and thoughtful speech to talk about each other. And I disfavor the one in favor of the other because what this awesome job has taught me about humanity. There's this amazing moment in the courtroom where a party who has the matter before the court is sitting there and they're watching a witness who's corroborating, not contradicting, but corroborating their testimony. The witness is in the box and they're testifying that they saw and they heard it the way the party said it happened. And in that moment, the party, sometimes they just rock. Sometimes they just shake their heads in agreement. Sometimes they cry. Sometimes they look like they want to stand up and say, hallelujah, amen. And all of this emotional and visceral response that's coming from them. It's coming from them because of this fundamental truth. People do not want to be labeled. They want to be known. Truthfully, completely, and precisely known. A good friend of mine, she jokes with me and she says, you are always on this anti-label soapbox, but you sure don't mind being called judge. And you know what? She's right. Because judge is not a label. It's a title. It's a title that I had to earn in my practice as a lawyer. I had to earn on the campaign trail. I have to earn every day that I take the bench. And what I feel certain about is if a day comes that I am not willing to earn it, the citizens of this county, they will take it from me on a single day, an election day, at the ballot box. But these labels, I tell her, they don't work that way. In the first instance, they get affixed to people whether or not they are earned and deserved and merited. And in the second instance, they don't fall away so easily. These, my friends, are the lessons that I have learned from that label. Thank you for listening to me.